I've been starting to see more discussions that are more in depth. We've about AI. We've kind of rushed into the whole AI discussion or the whole AI implementation and use thing. And, kind of became this snowball, and everybody just jumped on it and started going and trying to figure out what to do with it. Some have been faster than others to adopt it and to use it. And I'm finally seeing, I think, some real usable discussions finally happening that I think um, make me happier that this are finally kind of happening because I think, and a friend pointed this out this week on a post he made, that similar to back in the day with cloud infrastructure and SaaS companies and stuff, I think that a lot of people, jumped on the technology board, jumped on board with the technology, but without really understanding what to do with it. And partly because that was an evolving thing, and so is this. But I think it's a worse problem today than it was even back then. And SaaS platforms like Salesforce and others have largely helped companies grow. And um, I think didn't really see their major decline in effectiveness and kind of their, I don't know, data integrity or data wellness, really what I call it. Really until a little bit later into their life cycle. So, and now we're kind of at the spot now where we see just tons of cloud platforms that are absolute messes, and don't nearly carry as much value as they carry cost. That's my assessment of it. People will disagree with that. That's fine. I could pretty easily prove that with just about any company. Um, but the AI wave is fundamentally different, and I've come up with like four reasons, four ways that I think it's essentially different. And so let me just walk through a couple of why I think this is different than before and what we're going to be facing. One, AI isn't just software, it's a cognitive infrastructure. And this is why I talk a lot recently about cognitive decline and the cognitive ability of companies. Um, because as tools become easier, similar to you know, blue collar construction, whatever, when you use tools, it's the thinking behind how to use those tools that makes the difference of whether those tools will be effective and achieve what they potentially could achieve. So I think the ability of leaders to lead and for company infrastructure, like internally, like the mental infrastructure, leadership infrastructure, to actually think as an organization, have cognitive um, success and abilities is very critical. So CRM systems mainly stored and organized information, right? And AI systems, however, and the thinking, the interpretation of it was still human, right? You would run reports and you would look at them and try and understand them and so forth. However, now AI systems increasingly are going to interpret information, they're going to generate information, they're going to make recommendations, they're going to automate decisions, and that's a much deeper layer that it's working than a CRM ever worked, right? Because it's doing things that you had people doing before. So this is a lot like less like building your own CRM and more like every employee suddenly gaining the ability to build mini cognitive systems. Now, that's very, very unusual because this is the first time where we've allowed the technology to not do the doing, but do the thinking, okay? Do the deciding. This means that, and if you understand, of course, AI, is that AI is completely dependent upon the data and the inputs of what's behind it. So we run the risk now of having people making these kind of automated flows and having AI make decisions based on inputs that are very poor. Because we haven't fixed data. We haven't really fixed how we're getting data anymore. Not, I mean, it's still a mess for the most part, right? We haven't learned how to think about processes better. I think we're worse than we were before because we've laid off a lot of people, the thinking parts of our companies. Um, the second thing is that really um, there's the barrier to creation has now collapsed, right? And before, to create something in a company, you had to go through 15 layers, right, to get something done. It's a deck, and 15 people reviewed it, and content and editors and designers and a lot of other things. But today, and you had to have people kind of like you kind of had gatekeepers that were pains in the butt. And as much as you didn't like it, there was some validity to it. And somewhat their resistance to do work was probably your saving grace sometimes, saving you from doing things you shouldn't do. Well, today there's that barrier has collapsed. So the ability to implement something really bad and fat and good, but bad is even easier than it ever has been. So now you have non-technical employees that can create automation, not just non-technical, but these are people who may not have the thinking and understanding and experience to do stuff. And we've turned them loose. You have prompts become pseudo programming without the thinking behind it and the logic and understanding of it, and agents can be assembled in no time at all. Departments can independently deploy workflows. Again, can be a really bad problem. So the scale of fragmentation can become way larger and can happen way faster than it ever could before. So a company can accidentally create 500 undocumented AI workflows in 6 months. You think your CRMs were a mess before? I mean, or you think your processes were a mess? Maybe these will clean up some of it. Maybe the AI will help the thinking of it and help consolidate and identify those problems. But somebody has to be overseeing that still. Otherwise, you get the equivalent of you've seen the AI pictures where the hand has like six fingers on it because it just doesn't render, something gets rendered wrong, or, just has a glitch in it. This is the equivalent of that from a process standpoint. You have a bunch of processes that look pretty, and then when you look closer, you're like, oh, there's a six finger in that. It's a second middle finger. That's what it is. So, third, AI exposes organizational intelligence problems. 100% does. I just telling you, this is for me, it's kind of amusing to watch because the exposure becomes so clear. And so many people have so little understanding of AI and how data and how these systems work, and have had the long conversations and learning that it takes to understand this. So bad organizations used to survive because humans compensated that for manually for things that were wrong in the technology, perhaps. You know, there was Bob and he knew where the spreadsheet was, and Karen understood the weird approval processes, and someone mentally stitched them all together to some degree. But AI now forces the organizations to formalize knowledge. And if you don't have good knowledge makers or good designers and people who can put together that information that AI operates on, you're going to be in trouble. So this means that bad data becomes way more visible. Contradictory processes surface. You get unclear ownership, and that becomes super painful. Fra excuse me, fragmented operations become very expensive, and AI then starts to act like a stress test for organizational cognition, which is exactly kind of the subject of what I've been writing a book on. is this cognitive problems inside companies. Fourth, the winners probably won't be AI first companies. Um, I agree with my friend's conclusion on that. I kind of agree to some degree. Um, the organizations, the winners will likely be here's where my winners are. Okay. Uh, Organizations with strong operational clarity, coherent data systems, process discipline. This is a leadership problem. Governance, leadership problem. Interoperable architectures. This is a thinking issue. Intentional knowledge management. This is a leadership and knowledge issue or thinking issue. Human intelligence augmentation. So this means there has to be human intelligence being augmented by machines. If we remove the need for people to have to think about their jobs every day, we reinforce bad things or implement new bad things without understanding. We've removed the connection to humans, and this is a problem because the what we've seen with friend technology over the last 10, 15, 20 years is a continuing to disconnect from the real world, from those they're in these companies and in designing products and designing things. We've seen some successes, but largely I think innovation has stalled in this manner. That's just, how I see that. Um, so not necessarily company using the most AI tools because eventually raw AI is going to um, access it, commoditizes everything, and everything starts to look the same. Everybody talks the same. I mean, you go look at the comments and the questions, for instance, and some of the LinkedIn posts. It's like, yeah, y'all sound the same, and none of you know what you're talking about. You're saying things that you think sounds smart, but there's like a layer of comprehension underneath that's still missing. Like you don't quite understand. It sounds like it's the right thing to say, but you don't know why it is. And that's a real problem. Um, Also, eventually models will improve universally. The AI models will, and the tooling will normalize. I do believe that for at least a while. What's going to become scarce and what has already become scarce in this, hey, let's get rid of costs and let's get rid of people because we can do everything automated. Again, there's some validity to that in some areas, but what we've done is we've said, oh, these doers can now do with AI things that we were doing. And we've said these people who are thinking, we don't need them anymore. We can use AI to do the thinking. So we've let go of a lot of people kind of in that middle non-doing space, the thinking space. So you have a whole bunch of leaders and a whole bunch of doers, and not a lot of thinkers in the middle in a lot of companies. That has been on decline in companies for quite a while. So you have scarcity in organizational coherence, judgment, trust, strategic orchestration, and coordination, collaboration, clean institutional thinking, and knowledge. Right, is going to be we don't have the patience to sit down and think of strategies and think of um, and ask hard questions and have debates anymore, right? We don't want conflict. We just get done, save money, make money, right? So I think many executives also are misunderstanding the opposite side of this. Some are becoming too governance heavy too early, for instance, and that's a whole nother subject. And there is danger in that of over centralizing the experimentation, locking down innovation, creating too much bureaucracy around AI, and waiting for perfect governance. That you don't want that because AI capability is just moving too fast. It becomes really, really difficult. Um, and before you've figured out what to do, the tools change to the degree where it doesn't make any sense anymore. So then the you organizations that are going to win need some sort of controlled chaos initially. And um, what that can look like is it can be, hey, let's contain this somehow, right? Let's let something go wild. It's like a terrarium, right? You're going to create a terrarium. It has purpose, it's controlled. Inside the terrarium, everything feels like chaos and things are going whatever it wants to do, and it's growing wild and whatever, but it's within that terrarium. So you have to kind of figure out what your terrariums what is the size bottle you're going to put this in and let be that way, and what's the degree of experimentation and the rules behind it and stuff. Now again, it sounds like I'm adding the layers of governance on it. Yeah, I am. Yeah, yeah, to some degree, but I think they can be done in a balanced way. um Discovery, decentralized learning, right? These kind of things have to exist. Then you add the layers of orchestration and governance. So you still have to know what your boundaries of safety are, right? And like, where can I let this run wild and not? And what are some things I can allow to happen? Now, if I were in a company and I had an R&D department, which nobody seems to have anymore, where somebody's like, we're just going to play with some ideas and they're free to kind of go do their things. Um, can you imagine how great that would be? Look, I'll tell you, when I was at BYU as a student, we had something like this. It was called the Instructional Technology Center. And early on in the game, this was in the 1990s, okay? This is late 1990s. They had a bunch of professors and people working in there who were basically taking wild ideas that people had and trying to make them work, combining education and technology. And they used a bunch of us students to help design and build and do these projects. And out of that came really innovative stuff that Clayton Christensen later even quoted in some of his books. And one of those projects, a couple of those projects, I was involved with. I helped design and do and build and implement, and it was a lot of fun. And I think that model really worked. They eventually got rid of it, consolidated it, over centralized it, and I think that's somewhat hurt their ability to continue to be um, to develop these kind of new experimental programs that develop the forefront of online education. BYU really was at the forefront of this and has long had online education and done some really amazing things with it. And we built this accounting program with Norm Nemro at BYU, and that was my project, and it was really groundbreaking. And to the point where it was so good that even there were large private well-known schools that were using this program, Ivy League programs that were using this because it was so well done. That doesn't happen without a separate kind of environment where evolution and experimentation can happen. Did that happen within the normal online? No, they had a separate department, a separate group that was doing online education stuff. They were just producing content. They were producing and doing, but they weren't experimenting. They weren't like coming up with new ideas and figuring out. I think the role of that in a company has needs to come back. I think companies who want to really truly succeed long term should implement innovation R&D shops for everything on operations. They play with all the new stuff, and you keep everything else steady, disciplined, and you focus on discipline and all that over here. And this side does crazy stuff, and then you have a team of implementers that bridges that gap, right? Like if I was to really think about how I would ideally do that, that's how I would do this. Um, with nuance and context, of course, applied. Anyway, if Salesforce had existed in a world where like every employee could prototype software instantly, innovation would have looked very differently. But it didn't. It tried to. Remember, it tried to go to the platform. They tried to change their name to Force.com and really push that as their name for a long time. Didn't really work because they didn't know how to sell it very well. They actually asked me to come in and speak at Dreamforce on this subject, on how to innovate on the platform. And I did that, what, 3 times plus at their marketing summit and stuff. Um, kind of to get people to see the platform differently than what they were, because we were building stuff on it that wasn't CRM per se. It was event software. I've built, asset management tools on it. We've done all sorts of crazy things on Salesforce, for instance. But we saw it differently and we were allowed to kind of experiment, and I worked with people who had an interesting vision. And that was a lucky thing in my career that I got to do. But I just don't think enough of that happened. So we are absolutely repeating the Frankenstein system problem from the CRM era. AI is way more dangerous, though. More powerful, it's more decentralized, and more cognitively transformative than CRM ever was. So the real risk is not just technical debt. Excuse me, it's organizational cognition or cognitive fragmentation. And honestly further decline. Doesn't make us smarter in some ways. It makes us more capable. It doesn't make us smarter. And I still think we haven't re-implemented the ability to think in our organizations. Um, I think we still don't know how to do data wellness. We still don't have organizational cognition. And I think most companies still think AI is mainly a tooling problem. It's not. It's an organizational intelligence problem. Anyway, that's my thoughts for today. Yeah, fun stuff. Good luck out there, guys. I mean, I use AI and um, all the time for different stuff and experiment with it. And it's really, really amazing. There's some things it does very, very well and some things it doesn't do very well at all. But the only time it's like the problem. I'll just say this closing. Do you have those friends, right, that repeat stories, like the story, there's all sorts of food myths, right? Like MSG. Um, there's a whole book on this, by the way, food, MSG and other food myths. The whole thing of myths is really interesting to me. But like the myths of like how margarine was invented and what it was invented for and all that kind of stuff. This stuff gets spread on Facebook and your friends read it and they go, "Oh, that must be the case," right? There was another one recently about uniforms and gymnasts and track athletes and stuff. There are all sorts of these that happen, and people just believe what they'll believe. They don't do any research. They don't do any lookup because they become lazy. And this trend towards laziness of thought is a real problem in organizations, because thought takes time. Real thought, good thought, often takes real time, takes slowing down, and most people don't want any of that. And so I think largely we have this problem with a lot of people who are using AI, putting it in place, and they don't know how to tell the difference between good and bad. And AI will honestly, if it has the opportunity to, it wants to confirm your bias or confirm your thinking, and it can take data that seemingly seems right and tell you wrong answers. So you have to be careful. You have to know how to train it, talk to it, set it up, quality control it to some degree. There's lots of things like that, right? That we're still figuring out. And I think the danger is that we aren't doing enough. We're wanting the tools and the models to get better to solve those problems, but it's not going to solve the problems per se, because what it operates on is data that humans give it. And if we don't know how to gather and manage data properly, and we don't know how to think properly, it's we're gonna tell it all sorts of poor things. And I think that's a real danger. Especially as you get within a context, you get these smaller models that are very specific to a set of data or a set of rules and operations internally, which I think is part of this large future coming. Um, which I'm excited about. I think there's a lot of great possibilities. So anyway, leadership and organization's ability to think, cognitive ability, are the two biggest problems with AI. Like I've always said, most technology problems are not a technology problem, they're people problems. And that is only going to get more exposed with AI. And question is, do we have the courage to be leaders and to slow down and think and return thinking to humans? Um, like the AI can do a lot of great thinking, but there's still a need for humans to be involved, uh, to add context and nuance and things that are important to what we do. Anyway, quit rambling on about this, but good luck.